Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we'll dive into a very exciting topic, recognition as a strategic business capability, advancing from program to performance driver. This session is eligible for HRCI, SHRM, and ATD professional development credits. Now let's meet today's speakers. We have David Bader, the Managing Director at Achievers Workforce Institute, and Dr. Marline Duroseau, Managing Director of HR and Leadership Development at Brennan Hall Group. A huge thank you to today's webinar sponsor, Achievers. Achievers connects people to purpose through meaningful recognition and motivating rewards. The recognition and rewards platform empowers organizations to shape culture, inspire action, and drive the behaviors that fuel business success. With the highest engagement in the industry and seamless integrations, they don't just help companies recognize great work, they help them transform it into results. Please be sure to visit them at www.achievers.com to learn more. Now, before we dive into today's content, let me tell you about Brennan Hall Group and some incredible learning opportunities that could help accelerate your career. Brennan Hall Group is a leading professional development firm that has been serving learning, talent, and HR executives worldwide for more than 30 years. We've advanced the growth and performance of millions of employees and leaders through our cloud-based platform, delivering evidence-based research, data, and certification programs that empower organizations to achieve excellence in every area of human capital management. Our impact spans more than 10 million employees and executives globally, supported by our comprehensive research library, strategic insights, and prestigious awards program. Below is a sample of the organizations we are proud to partner with. We have incredible learning and networking opportunities. Our two BRIC events happening later this year, our AI Summit on October 15th, and our Leadership Summit on November 17th and 18th. As a thank you for joining us, you'll receive an invitation to experience the Brennan Hall Group Eminence Program with complimentary 7-day access. During your trial, you'll be able to explore our award-winning research, hundreds of courses and certifications, thousands of practical resources, and the tools our clients use to support learning, talent, leadership, HR, inclusion, AI, and the future of work. Because there's so much available, you'll be able to choose when you'd like your 7 days to begin. Just watch it for the follow-up email after today's webinar, where you'll find all the details and link to request your trial. And don't forget to save the date for next year's 2027 HCM Excellence Conference happening January 26th through the 28th. All details for everything I've mentioned will be available in a PDF you'll receive within 24 hours after this webinar. Now, with all of that said, I would like to launch a poll question. What would you like to learn more about? Is it our Eminence program? Maybe it's one of our award programs, the 2027 HCM Excellence Conference, or maybe it's one of our BRIC events. Thank you, everyone. I'll leave this up for a few more seconds and then we will move on. All right, and just a few quick things to note. Our chat box is open, so if you have any questions, please use the questions panel on your control bar. We'll be answering them throughout the session. We're also recording today's webinar, and you'll receive an email within 24 hours with a link to the recording and a PDF of the slides. Feel free to share your thoughts as you go along. The input makes it more valuable for everyone. I'd like to pass things off to Dr. Marline.
Thank you so very much, Ivy. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And today we are going to jump right back into it. This is poll question number 2, and it's directly connected to today's conversation. We'd like to know which phase your organization most closely is in match with for rewards and recognition. You may be in a reactive or ad hoc stage, standardized, defined, which is more strategic, or you're optimized. So we'll definitely take a few seconds here while you respond to this particular poll question. And remember, there's no right or wrong answer. The goal is simply to understand where organizations are on their journey with rewards and recognition. Okay. So it looks like we are in a standardized
Hmm.
stage. And this is really helpful because it also is reflective of what we're seeing in the market now. And organizations are not necessarily all in the same place, which is why it's
Hmm.
important to have a maturity lens and why it's valuable that we'll be able to collect that data. So let's connect
Hmm.
that poll to what Brandon Hall Group research tells us about recognition maturity. So you'll notice here that the research shows that recognition maturity has advanced, but it hasn't advanced evenly. You'll see here on the slide that 60% of organizations operate at either a strategic or a optimized recognition maturity, and 91% have moved beyond just purely reactive operations. So let's break that down a little bit. And this is really important because it tells us that recognition has moved out of the margins. So it's no longer just a fringe HR benefit program. Okay. Many organizations are already treating recognition as something more structured, okay, more intentional about rewarding and recognizing their employees. And it's connected more to organizational outcomes. So it's one of those things where we talk about ROI, and as a former CFO, a lot of the times what we ask for is, what is the return on investment in this? So you'll notice that because recognition is being more recognized as connected to organizational outcomes, therein lies the organization's ROI of investing into rewards and recognition programs for the benefit of the people, which in turn benefit the company. Okay. But we also have to remember that the distribution of this also matters. So we see the organizations are across the four phases, right? 9% in phase one, 31% in phase two, 34% in phase three, and 26% in phase four. And what all this means is that organizations may all say that they value recognition, but they're not all operating at the same level of maturity, right? You can value it, but how are you operationalizing it? And because of that, they're not all getting the same level of business value that can come from having the recognition. And when you have a company that uses recognition as an occasional appreciation activity, right, that's not going to generate the same insight or consistency or behavioral reinforcement that comes with an organization. It has to be embedded into the organization's system, their culture, their workflows, and their leadership practices. So I want to ask David, what your thoughts are on these stats as shown here on this slide.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Marr. Lovely to be with everyone today. I think you're right on the money. You noticed I'm a vigorous nodder, so I was nodding in agreement as you were
Yeah.
speaking, and I see the exact same thing. I think that our own research at the Achievers Workforce Institute does show that it's unquestionable that when employees are recognized frequently, they feel better. But what's also true is they perform better too. And so I think this is an important distinction that as humans, we all agree that people should feel seen, valued, and appreciated. But as a human resources function, there's a lot of opportunity to operationalize or embed, as you were describing, recognition into the everyday of every employee.
Thank you so much for that. That's really important because, this goes to the saying, right? We can't just talk about it, we have to be about it, right? And that's what
That's
we're here
right.
to help organizations do just that.
Mhm.
So the shift we're seeing, just like David and I just talked about, is seeing recognition go from just being a program to being recognized as a system. So at higher levels of progression on the rewards and recognition model, when people are at higher levels of progression, organizations, they share several important characteristics. Okay, so their recognition strategies are integrated, right, embedded into their business priorities, right? It's not just something that we check a box that says it has to be done. It's embedded as part of the priorities of the business. They make those evidence-based compensation and recognition decisions because it's part of what's integrated in the company. And these particular companies that are also higher in terms of their practice of reward and recognition, they connect the performance and the reward systems, right? They both of them are connected versus having just two separate items, being looked at. And additionally, these particular companies, they verify the links that exist between recognition investments and organizational outcomes. Okay, so this is a very different model than simply having a platform where employees can occasionally thank each other. Right. So what separates these leading organizations is not that they have the recognition in place. It's that recognition is integrated and it's connected and it's measured as a continuous strategic capability that the company possesses. Okay. And this is where recognition begins to function as more than just a morale booster. Okay. It becomes a reinforcement mechanism and tells people what actually matters. So it really helps the employees to understand which behaviors are valued, and it creates that feedback loop between strategy, behavior, culture, and outcomes. So that feedback loop is what makes recognition so powerful when it's done well. Okay, because, and David, I know you can speak to this as well. There's one thing to have the system in place, there's one thing to execute it, but what does it all mean? And is the employee getting value, and what type of feedback they give? If you can give us a few lines on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think for me, the operative words that jump off this slide in particular are first of all, system. This is a system not just for scaling smiles, but for scaling the behaviors that drive performance for individuals, for teams, and for organizations. And so when you align recognition in the way that your findings describe, it goes from being performative to being something that drives performance. I think the second thing, that word that jumps off for me is this idea of connected. We're living through a period of great disconnection, despite the fact that we have more ways to connect than ever. And what research shows is that when employees, to your point, are frequently, not just episodically, but frequently recognized, this is the thing that connects them to their manager, to their mandate, to their peers, to the behaviors that drive their performance. And then I think the last thing that jumps off for me is aligning it to outcomes. And what we see through our research and 25 years of working with the world's most change-ready organizations is that that frequent recognition has a particular utility, not just in making people feel good and commit to the task at hand, but in repeating certain specific behaviors that drive performance or outcomes. So a lot to unpack on this slide, but those are three things that jump out for me.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. And I love you circling back to the behavior aspect, because that's something that in the HCM world now, we have to get back into the behaviors, because you'll find
100%.
that, yeah, because people will, take on the reward and recognition. They'll do the performance, right? They'll get the task done, because performance can be broken up as well. So let's say they check off and they get the task done, but are the behavioral changes coming along with that, right?
Right.
And having that connection is also part of the behavior, because yes, we're meeting the performance, we're getting the job done, but like you said, are we connected to all of these ecosystems in the company, right? Connected to the employees, connected to your peers, connected to your managers. And you can determine all of that too by way of behavior sometimes as well. So definitely on the
that's why I think one of the missions, certainly of this broadcast, but your research, is to get the understanding of recognition and reward and the opportunity they represent from being a culture program or only the domain of HR, where we sort of get our values off the wall and into the hearts and minds of our people. Like, we need to go lower to that behavior level, because you're exactly right. That's where the rubber meets the road. So very, very important.
Thank you. Thank you for that, David. And before we go deeper into the operating requirements as it relates to our rewards and recognition, let's ask one more question about what matters most in your recognition strategy right now in your company. So for this poll, we'd like to understand what outcomes matter most. Are you most focused on improving retention and engagement, strengthening manager effectiveness and culture, connecting recognition to measurable business outcomes, or embedding recognition more seamlessly into your daily workflows? And again, there may be more than one answer that resonates with you or your organization, but choose the one that feels most important right now for you.
We're not allowed to wager, right? There's no wager.
That would be fun, right? But I think regardless, we'd all win, right? Because there's no wrong answer. So that would be a good wager, a good wager. Okay. All right. So it looks like we have here strengthening manager effectiveness. Okay. That one is definitely important because this focus shows here managers are often the point, right, where recognition becomes either consistent and meaningful, or it remains uneven and dependent on individual behavior. So great responses here. Thank you so much for that. All right, so next up here, we're going to talk about how strategic recognition requires, more, going beyond just having good intentions. So to move from phase 2 to phase 3, right, on our maturity model, organizations typically need to have some things. And some of those things include integrated reward systems. Those are our two words again that David and I like, that integration and the word system. So that'll help you move from phase 2 to phase 3, okay, moving up the chain. Because remember what our data showed, everyone is along the maturity road somewhere, but everyone is on there unevenly, right? And we do move in baby steps. So in this case, we're going to go from phase 2 to phase 3, having those integrated reward systems, okay? Analytics capability beyond just basic reporting. Okay. Now, a lot of the times, which we all know, we love reports, we love data. But what do we do with that? What does it mean? How can we make changes if needed based on this reporting and this data that we're doing? And in addition to that, to take it a step, go a step backwards, does your system have the capability to even collect the valuable data, right? What type of data are you collecting? You may have a system and it has a whole bunch of information, but when you're running the reports, what are the reports? Are they even able to run the right reports, so to speak, for lack of better words, okay? Also, to move from phase 2 to phase 3, you have where governance is applied consistently across compensation and recognition initiatives, because part of rewards includes compensation, and we have to be able to, govern how that's done, and it's done in a effective and, in a compliant way as well, right? And you also have to have strategic alignment to those business goals. At the end of the day, organizations are in business for many reasons, and one of them include making sure we have positive business outcome and what is the overall goal of the business. So if you don't do anything else, you want to make sure you align what's needed with your people, right, which are the heart of the company, in order to also meet your business goals. And next you have, they have active participation and rewards from leadership in organizational strategy, right? We're actively participating in it, because oftentimes we have these things, like David mentioned, it's hanging on the wall, but how do we operationalize it? Who's actually making sure that, yes, it's going to be on the wall, but is it, does it need to be dusted? Does it need to be polished, right? Who's taking ownership of making sure that it jumps off the wall and actually becomes operationalized? And this is not, just an overnight shift. We want to make sure we make that clear as well, right? The typical timeline to move from phase 2 to phase 3 is about 12 to 24 months, because, recognition maturity is operational. It's not aspirational. Okay, so you don't have to simply say, okay, I'm going to be strategic by saying our new strategy is that recognition matters. That's not a strategy, right? These organizations progress when they build the systems, the governance, the analytics, okay, all of the leadership alignment, okay, and operating rhythm required to make sure that recognition is consistent and it's also relevant to the business. So, and in addition to this, before I get David to jump in this pool here with me, this is also where some organizations get stuck trying to move from phase 2 to phase 3. They may have that recognition platform, they may have the program, they may even have people who participate. But if recognition is not connected to the broader priorities, okay, of the business, and it's not supported by data, which means we're just doing things and not knowing how it's performing. Is it right? Is it good? Is it effective? Then if you don't have that insight, then organizations may still be operating on the lower end or below its full potential. So David, I'd love to get your take here on this information.
Yeah, Dr. Mar, I'd probably start with the last thing you said about connecting recognition and rewards to an organization's strategy and business goals. And my mother-in-law often reminds me that it's nice to be nice, and she's right.
Yes.
However,
yes.
The way we move recognition and reward from nice to have to need to have is in that very alignment that you are describing. In nearly 30 years of working, I have never seen a warm fuzzy get funded. ROIs get funded. Things that move the needle on how a company makes money or how it averts risk or how it reduces costs, those things get funded. And so I think this is a critical lever, whether you're on your maturity model or just trying to defend the investment that you want to make in your people. Connecting it to business outcomes is critical. I think the other thing that jumps off to me from this slide in particular is the first two bullets around integrated systems and analytics capability. And, it does occur to me that we lean to technology quite often to solve our problems. Most organizations have, 3, 4, 5, as upwards of 10 different systems of record, and then dozens of point solutions that employees are meant to rely on to get work done. And it's a lot of tech. And so there's no shortage of inputs, but what you're trying to measure is impact. And what I see a lot of organizations doing is just really counting things. And I think what you want to do is get to a level where you're measuring the impact that you're making. And, nearly 20 years of doing this particular work in this particular category, every customer that I meet has a great appetite for benchmarks. We all have this curiosity that we want to see how we compare to other people. In my opinion, benchmarks are very rarely meaningful because the norms that matter are yours over time. And what's more impactful, I think, is when faced with a similar fork in the road, what did a customer like you do? And so rather than predictive analytics, I think organizations should be aspiring towards prescriptive. What are the things we need to do in the face of this data to make a difference in driving the outcomes that we care about?
That is phenomenal. Prescriptive, meaning I've assessed, I've run the tests, I've talked to you, I've gotten the opinions, I've observed, I've gathered all of this relevant data, and based on this, here's what I prescribe. I love that. What a great visual. That is phenomenal. Thank you so much for that, David. So you see, when recognition does get to a point where it's operating at scale, the value changes significantly. Okay. So again, across, nearly 5 million employees and more than 600 customer organizations, Achievers reports 93% adoption and 52% monthly active usage, right? This is along with millions of engagement moments annually. So at this level of participation, we see the numbers on the screen. So at this level of participation, recognition does more than just reinforce, okay, appreciation. It generates that continuous stream of behavioral data, which is what David and I mentioned before, that behavioral aspect in addition to the data. And that data can help reveal the different patterns that are tied to performance, collaboration, values alignment, which is really, really important. Everyone must have or be on the same page when it comes to what the organization values, what's important, retention, learning, and culture. So, in other words, recognition becomes that signal system, right? And it helps organizations understand that not only whether employees are being recognized, but what they're being recognized for, who is reinforcing the right behaviors, where is the connection strong, where is there a gap, and that's the bridge from recognition as just an activity to recognition becoming an insight. Okay. And when organizations can turn that insight into action, recognition becomes that system of influence. So, with that, Brandon Hall Group, research and the context, right, that we're talking about, with that in mind, I want to turn the conversation over to my partner here, David, to bring in that achiever's perspective and explore how recognition has evolved and where it is today and what it can enable next and for the future. So, David, I'd love to start for you to ground us in the work of Achievers Workforce Institute and, how you're thinking about the state of recognition today.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. Picking up on something that you shared in the previous slide about 2x engagement, by our count, the average employee in an organization is getting recognized 3 to 4 times a year, but 12 to 14 times a year on the Achievers platform. And that's not an accident. It's not an accident that we're the most frequently used program in the category. And it's because the data shows that the more frequently someone is recognized, the better they feel and the better they perform. And in fact, that's the mission of the Achievers Workforce Institute. We're a team of workforce researchers and data scientists, and our intent through our global research studies, our strategic impact projects with customers, analyzing the billions of data points that are on our platform, are really to understand, what does work need to look like so that it works for people? What motivates someone to do the best work of their lives? And it turns out, if you go to the next slide, frequent recognition has a lot to do with it. Frequent recognition has a big league impact on how employees feel about the work that they do every single day. And our research shows that when employees are recognized frequently, meaning at least monthly, they are twice more likely to feel physically and mentally well when they're at work. They're 3 times more engaged. They're 5 times more likely to report a strong sense of belonging. They're 10 times more likely to recommend their manager. We all understand the idea that people don't quit their company, they quit their boss. And so, frequency has a lot to do with the experience of work that employees have every single day. If you go to the next slide, what's also true, and Dr. Mar, you and I have been talking about this, is that frequent recognition is a signal. It has a particular utility in shaping the behaviors that we want employees to repeat every single day, because we know that they're the things that drive their performance and the growth and performance of the team that they're on and the organization as a whole. In fact, 85% of employees will repeat an action if they are recognized for it. And so if you're an organization that's trying to reduce safety incidences or build resilience or ensure that the training that is critical to the next phase of your growth is not just completed, but activated, then frequent recognition has a role not only in helping your people feel better, but perform better. If we go to the next slide, I think this is fascinating. Here's a provocation. About a year and a half ago, we asked through a global research study a question: which job would you prefer? Would you prefer a job where every single day you felt seen, valued, and appreciated? Or Would you prefer a job where you were paid 30% more, but those feelings were absent? 75% of the respondents took praise over the pay raise. And I think it's true that Dr. Mar, you and I would take the pay raise today if it was offered to us, but it's unlikely to be the thing that keeps us around tomorrow if we don't feel that the work we do today or tomorrow or next month actually matters to anyone. I can't think of a time in my working life where mattering has mattered more. If you go to the next slide, here's what else I have to say about frequent recognition. Frequent recognition has this opportunity to impact the customer experience and the employee experience. We see from research projects we've done with customers that it's delivered a 20% or 20 point, I should say, increase in net promoter scores. It's been a predictor of whether someone can be mobile inside an organization. When we think about the advent of reskilling that we're all going through at the moment, the ability to use the peer validated skills that you have to cut your own path through the organization is critical. And indeed, we also see that in almost every case, high performers are recognized more frequently than those who are just barely making the grade. And so if you go to the next slide, my thesis is that frequent recognition connects employees better than anything to mission, to mandate, to manager, and peers. And I would really argue this is critical because our research shows that as of right now, 92% of employees are unclear about what's expected of them at work, and just 23% feel capable of managing change. And when you think about it, change is all work is. We begin our day or our week or our month or our quarter with our best laid plans, but the moment we're on the clock, we find ourselves in collision with a customer who needs something or a colleague who has a different expectation or market conditions that are far beyond our control. And so frequent recognition is a thing that not only connects employees in these meaningful ways, but it gets our people change ready in a way that's critical for the moment we're living through. And it's because if we go to the next slide, at least in the rooms that I'm in, this is the elephant that is in every single room. Research from McKinsey is showing that 92% of organizations are increasing their investments in artificial intelligence, but only 1% are seeing a return. And I think I know the reason why. If you go to the next slide, it's because research from Achievers Workforce Institute shows that just 1 in 5 employees feel trained, supported, and prepared for AI. And so what I would argue to all of you as we live through this unprecedented era of change is that when we're speaking about AI in particular, this is not a technology gap. This is a human gap. And uniquely, for the first time, I think as well, one of the challenges is that this transformation that we're all experiencing in different ways is not top down. It's bottom up too, because employees are experimenting in their own ways with tools that can offload, for example, the tasks that they don't really like to do that much. And so if we go to the next slide, what I would challenge to all of you, and I'm guessing, but I'd probably bet all the money in my pockets. This is the second wagering reference in our time together today, Dr. Mar. But I would probably bet all the money in my pockets that all of you on this call are doing something with AI today. And what I'm here to tell you is that your project is probably going to fail unless you change behavior. Your AI transformation isn't going to happen because of the training you're doing or because of the tools that you have access to. The very behaviors that AI depends on, learning, collaboration, judgment, trust, they don't scale through mandates. They don't scale because you need them to scale. They scale through what Dr. Mar has been talking about, which is positive reinforcement. And so if you go to the next slide, what I would argue, what I would reframe for all of you is that frequent recognition is not the thank you program. It's not the system for scaling smiles. Frequent recognition is the thing that enables AI transformation. It's the reinforcement system, pardon me, that makes transformation stick. And if you go to the next slide, what our research shows is that frequent recognition multiplies the very behaviors that AI requires. Things like trust in leadership, clarity in moments of change, psychological safety to know that I can experiment, and if I strike out, it's not the end of the world. Persistence through disruption. Frequent recognition in this way is a change agent. And it's not because it pushes employees, it's because it signals to employees, it supports employees, it reinforces for employees. And so I think my last slide, if you go to the next one, is to we zoomed in on AI, but let's zoom all the way back out. And what I'm here to report with 25 years of evidence behind me is that frequent recognition is actually the thing that enables any transformation. It's the reinforcement system. It's the system of influence that Dr. Marr talked about that makes any transformation stick. And so it's among the reasons why I'm so bullish on frequency in particular, because the research shows that frequency is the thing that drives the change and shapes the behaviors that we're after.
So much for that. I want, me, I'm going to have some follow-up questions for you, David,
Sure.
right? That I know our audience would benefit from as well. And one of the things you mentioned is that work is change. Every day you come in, right, we're working towards something, being able to pivot, being able to change gears because you might have a customer, or then it's maybe your manager needs you, or maybe something personal comes up. So in the midst of that, right, all of this change that's going on, there's also the AI aspect. Like you mentioned, I'm pretty sure, and I would wage with you too, that everyone here is dealing with or using some kind of AI or in the process of implementing AI or adopting AI in their organization. So I just wanted to reiterate that, because being able to recognize, okay, and have that proper recognition for the change that they're going through or the transformation that they're taking on when it comes to their work, right? AI in particular, recognition helps support the behavior, right? The change that's required in order for the transformation to take place. So that frequent recognition will allow that scaling and that transformation to continue as well. And, I wanted to ask you, if leaders today on the call can take one action away from this conversation, what should they do differently in how they use recognition to support change, maybe the AI change or, workforce model or different things that they may be experiencing right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll answer it in two parts. And first, I'll begin by correcting myself. I've been talking about frequent recognition, and it's true. Yes. That frequent recognition makes people feel better and perform better. But it can't be an endless parade of attaboys or good jobs or thank yous. It needs to be meaningful. And what I mean when I say meaningful is that the recognition is personal, it's specific, it's impact oriented. And to that end, through periods of, disruption or confusion, frequent recognition has this other superpower of being a sense maker. It's the thing that you said it earlier, Dr. Marr, it's a form of feedback. It's a precious form of feedback because it can clarify for someone the difference between good and great. And in some cases, it can give them clues on how to close that gap, especially when recognition is public and you see your top performers, for example, being recognized for the very things that they're doing that lead to their performance. So I think that's part one, that it's not just frequent, but it also must be meaningful. I think the second thing is relying back on our evidence, which shows that, as I said earlier, we've been tracking change readiness really since 2020. And so what we saw around 2020 was that about a third of employees felt capable of meeting unexpected challenges. And if you time check, we're living at that point through a global pandemic, new modes of working, social justice issues rising like probably never before into our work lives, debates about, what we should say and what we should not say. And so that was maybe not surprising that most employees at that point felt incapable of managing change. What became distressing as we've continued to monitor this every year since 2020 is that it's going down. And so, as I said earlier, just 23% of employees now feel capable of meeting unexpected challenges. And yet, what the evidence shows is that when an individual is frequently and meaningfully recognized, and in particular by their manager, when that happens just once a month, it quadruples an individual's confidence that they can manage change. It quadruples their perception of their team's ability to manage change and their manager's ability to manage change. And so that's my top takeaway in lots and lots of words, is that, instrument for yourselves a way to frequently and meaningfully recognize your people at least once a month. And then let me challenge that once a month is not enough. I think that if you're actually paying attention inside your organization, every day you see things that your people are doing to make a difference in the lives of colleagues and customers. And so start with once a month, but then commit to getting better, because that commitment is the thing that builds confidence and helps people manage change.
Amazing. I really appreciate that answer, because what you're finding is that statistic is actually, very eye-opening, that only 23% of people feel that they are or can or equipped to, sustain or go through a change. And when people have that lack of confidence, it often shows up in how they perform and in their behavior as well, because they are approaching it from a doubt standpoint versus an empowerment standpoint. And one of the ways to get it up exactly is by what you're saying, that frequent recognition, but frequent recognition that matters and is meaningful. So thank you so much for that. And, I have a question here in the chat from Julie. How do you keep recognition from becoming a check the box activity so it feels more genuine? So now that's more practical from you. How do you keep that from becoming just a check and have it feel more genuine?
Yeah, well, the full disclosure here is that I obviously work for a recognition platform company. And so I do think that a technology is exciting, because a technology has the opportunity to scale and to integrate into the other systems you're using every single day. But I think what's also true is that each one of us carries around a toolbox that may not live on a platform. And even though there's great utility in making sure that you're scaling someone's impact and the difference between good and great through something like a platform, that doesn't stop you stopping in the hall if you happen to work in an office and say, great job, or to kick off a town hall, or in a company newsletter, or wherever the case may be. But in all cases, I think what's true is that we've left this era of one size fits all, which is part of that checkbox compliance feel that Julie is describing, for an era of hyper personalization. And so it's probably different strokes for different folks. And what that requires is managers in particular understanding what work needs to look like for that individual on their team. Some people like to have their name in lights all the time. Some people are shyer and would never want something like a personal milestone, acknowledged. Some people are just about the outcomes. Some people need to be recognized for the effort they're making, because boy, oh boy, those outcomes feel far out of reach. And so it's a very long way of saying that it's hard work to do it the right way, but recognition is more meaningful when you understand what motivates the individuals on your team.
That answers the question. And thank you so much for asking it. And David, I just have one question too that I'd like to pose. And how can using recognition and implementing implementing it effectively support the transformation when employees are already experiencing change fatigue? So now it's, okay, I know I'm going to be recognized, but how is this going to work? How can the recognition be different, or how can it support? Because every single day I'm going through something changing. So change fatigue
Yeah.
is a big thing nowadays. So how can a company use recognition to support that transformation for them?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things, both C words. I think one is, clarity. I think part of the stress of change is not knowing what my first next step should be.
Right.
And what our research shows is that, clarity follows recognition when communication breaks down. Most people don't feel informed during periods of change. Um, uh, and what we see through our research is that recognized employees are much more likely. In fact, almost every employee is more likely to feel informed. And again, a majority of employees are likely to know what's expected of them at work when they are frequently recognized. I think the second thing, though, is the second C word is probably confidence. It's a friendly reminder that you've done this before. As I was thinking back to the pandemic and 2020, I think that I was surprised when I saw that data that at that time, just a third of employees felt capable of meeting our expected challenges because, my experience of that period of time was that people had demonstrated that they could survive and thrive through anything. But as a species, most of us don't love change. I count myself in the minority. I love change, but most people don't like it. Most people prefer comfort and the known. And yet, every day we change. And so, recognition can be this way to remind people that they've done this before, that they've been here before, that there are people around them that support them. I think those three things add up to a confidence to put the next foot forward.
And that's amazing that you mentioned that, because one of the things I know for a fact too is that people don't remember or recall or live in a past where they remembered what they overcame. Right. So what
Yeah,
they see is just strictly what's in front of them. And without that clarity and without that confidence, they don't remember that they're resilient, because you have
that's
to have
right.
gone through things before, build that resilience. So tap into it so that you can get through it. But of course, by being supported from your leaders, managers, everyone, with that clarity, building that confidence, having that roadmap.
Mhm.
So thank you so very much, David. This has been
Thank
just
you.
a wonderful, wonderful, thoughtful, and very practical conversation today. And what I truly appreciate most is that this discussion, it really shows how recognition is more than just a feel-good activity, right?
That's right.
Recognition can reinforce behavior, it shapes the culture, it supports change and transformation, like we just talked about, and it generates insight into how work is actually happening. Okay. So,
Right.
I just want to thank everyone so much for showing up today and for everyone that's joined us. And again, David, thank you and Achievers very much for just a great conversation. And everyone, you're going to receive a PDF of the presentation and a link to the recording within 24 hours, as we mentioned earlier at the top of the hour. And, we hope that today's discussion gave you a stronger view of how we can use recognition and move it from simply being a program or a line item in the company's to-dos and moving it over to a strategic business capability, one that, again, reinforces behavior, strengthens the connection that exists in organizations, and supports the transformation that organizations are working so hard to achieve right now. So thank you again for being with us. And I really hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. David, I don't know if you had any final parting words for us.
Oh, just how much I appreciate you and the opportunity to share with you and learn from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.